truth? Can you force people to become free? And maybe that is something that is done in the Matrix as well. Because Cypher's critique to Morpheus is that all he says is, yeah, take this red pill and you will know the truth. And Cypher says, if you would have told the whole truth, then you would have said, I don't want to take this blue pill. So maybe it's also a bit of an act of violence by saying, take this pill, you'll get to know the truth, and that then, you know, you're violently removed from an artificial womb and all that. So how ethical is Morpheus? There is some contemporary relevance, maybe, because nowadays we are living perhaps in a cave of our own, and are also awash in shadows, only then digital shadows, that emit not from a fire, but from our smartphones, our laptops, which are sucking information out of us. So maybe we're now in the matrix of social media. And if you look at conspiracy theories, you also see that there are people that claim, when they believe in a conspiracy theory, that they are woke. And as we shall see at the end of the presentation, being red-pilled, having taken the red pill, has been co-opted by the far right. Right. So part 2: free will, identity, happiness, religion, and the meaning of existence, or put in simpler words, the choices we make. In order to make the right choices, or in order to know things, one must know thyself, according to Socrates. And Socrates is, next to Baudrillard, the only philosopher that is directly quoted in the movie. And the oracle says to Neo, you should know yourself. Why? Because then he can know whether or not he is the one or not. So time for some self-examination, I'll say. And note, in a religious, the movie has a lot of religious references. And an important metaphor in the movie is the mirror. And this mirror stands as a metaphor for the question that one should know oneself. And the mirror also plays a very important role in Buddhist philosophy. That mirror means not only seeing your reflection, but means also an incitement to do reflection, to reflect on oneself. First, when one sees oneself in the mirror, you know that this mirror image is not your entire identity, it's only your appearance. So that is a way the mirror reminds you of reflecting on your identity. And only when you truly know yourself can you reach enlightenment in Buddhist philosophy. So hence the play with Morpheus' glasses, of course, are mirrors. And when Neo wakes up from the Matrix, he sees a mirror change, become fluid. But should we know ourselves? Can we know ourselves? And does all knowledge start with self-knowledge, as for instance René Descartes also taught? Do we need to know ourselves to free ourselves? If we know ourselves, will we make better choices? If we know ourselves, will we become more authentic? If we know ourselves, will we find meaning? Will we be happier if we know ourselves? Or might it be the opposite? And if we know ourselves, do we then know what must be done? Or what the right thing to do is? Or is ignorance bliss, also when it comes to ourselves? And this brings us to the relation philosophers think about between knowing the truth, happiness, and finding meaning. Plato believed that without knowing the truth, one can never find true happiness and true meaning. I don't know if Plato is correct, but that was his claim. And note that here you see the book Simulacra and Simulation from the French philosopher Baudrillard. And one of the challenges of one of the risks of living a meaningless life, or with only empty enjoyment, then we run the risk of falling into the nihilistic trap. And nihilism is the idea that nothing in the end is worthwhile. That values or beliefs are nothing but human constructs that they use in order to try to make sense of the world. Hence why Nietzsche called it ultimately a will to power. would probably agree with Cypher that ignorance is bliss. Because knowing the truth, as we see at the beginning of the movie when Neo is freed, is terrible. He panics, he wants to be taken out into the Matrix. He starts pushing the crewman of the Nebuchadnezzar, saying, unplug this, get this thing out of me, and he starts saying, this can't be true, etc., etc., and he collapses and pukes. So coming to know the truth is a shock. That is why also Plato says that when the cave prisoner escapes, his eyes hurt, which you also see in the movie, by the way. That Neo asks when he's being operated on, that he asks Morpheus, why do my eyes hurt? And Morpheus says, well, it's because you never used them before. That's a clear reference to Plato, whose cave prisoner's eyes are hurt by the light. And Cypher says, meaning he ultimately chooses for hedonism, not for a meaningful or valuable existence, and he says, you know, I know the state doesn't exist. I know that when I put it in my mouth, the matrix is telling my brain that it is juicy and delicious. And after 9 years, do you know what I realize? Ignorance is bliss. But we can question the hedonist in asking, is happiness truly the sum of all things we enjoy? And does it then matter if these enjoyments are real or artificially induced? And that makes us, that can make us think about another famous thought experiment from philosophy. Say one day they invent the so-called experience machine. And if you enter this machine, the scientists will ask you, what kind of life do you want us to program for you? And you can say, well, I want to be a famous basketball player, I want to be the most influential philosopher of all time, etc. And the scientist says, okay, we're now going to put you to sleep, put electrodes on your brain, and now you will experience being the most famous philosopher, etc. Is that something we would want? Robert Nozick asks. And he thinks most people would not choose this because, according to him, people want to do certain things in their lives and want to affect reality in a certain way in accordance to one's beliefs about the world, one's values, etc. But Cypher obviously chooses to go inside the experience machine. The matrix is then, in a sense, an experience machine. According to some philosophers, hedonism, especially Kierkegaard, at some point hedonism gets old. And when hedonism gets old, you've tried everything, you know, you've been with all kinds of people that you want to, you've tried all types of friendships, you have the diplomas you want, the job you want, you've had all the fun you've had, then unavoidably, according to Kierkegaard, at some point you will be bored. And you will become something like a junkie, every time trying to seek a new enjoyment, and so on and so on. And this boredom might lead to nihilism, to thinking, well, my life until so far has been nothing, has consisted in nothing but enjoying myself. But is there any meaning in this hedonistic happiness? And one could then maybe argue that life in the matrix might not have any meaning, since we have no means of affecting the world in there. The computers do that for us. All enjoyment in there, in fact, is equally pointless. And that brings me to another notion of happiness coming from Aristotle. And Aristotle would refute Cypher's claim, because I'm paraphrasing here, this is not a quote, but Aristotle says that happiness does not come from the sum of enjoyments. It's part of life, but you should not overindulge. He thought that true happiness comes from living well. And living well, according to him, is honing one's virtues, so trying to be a good person is what he means by that, and honing one's capabilities in order to gain excellence. And he thinks that, for instance, so he said that the taste of education is bitter, but its fruit is sweet. So, for instance, I've been a student for a very long time. Studying for exams, making exams is very painful, but I do have now some long-term happiness because I have a degree in philosophy. Same goes for this reading group. I spent hour upon hour preparing this, whereas I would maybe like to do something else, but in the long run, I will be happy that I forgot my hedonism temporarily in the attempt to organize a philosophy meetup. And also then with Aristotle, happiness comes also from finding our true self, namely coming to know what you're good at. And Kant said, happiness also comes from finding our true self, but also the highest good, which he meant with the highest moral good. And he said, we first have to be deserving of happiness. And he says only those are deserving of happiness that live in accordance to what he called an ultimate goodwill. You can compare it a little bit with Buddhism. Kant believed that your intentions have to be pure. And every time before you act, you have to ask yourself, the principle or the maxim or the criteria that I'm going to act upon now, can I want that this becomes a universal rule? Meaning, can I want that everybody would do the same thing as I'm doing now? And also with the Buddha, you see that enlightenment is only can only be gotten out of compassion. And the Bodhisattva keeps, of course, being reborn until he has helped or she has helped all sentient beings become enlightened. And therein we find the true purpose of life and also happiness. Then Nietzsche, who also said that only living an authentic life brings happiness. He was also a critic to hedonism and the utilitarian philosophy that is based on it. And utilitarianism is the ethical school of thought that says what matters most is the greatest happiness for the greatest number. So if your moral act leads to someone having less pain or more happiness, it is good. But Nietzsche disagreed. Also because he thought that you should not let values and meaning be externally imposed on you. Not by religion, not by utilitarianism, not by the economy, etc. But he said one should find and construct one's own values. And he thought that you are only ethical if you then, out of these values, concern yourself with only the far future. Let's see if this is a bit of a different sound, but I'm going to check if somebody wants access. Oh, yeah, in 10 minutes, right. So we've reached part 3 of 4. Smith, of course, in a famous monologue, shares a revelation that he's had about humankind. And I'd like to share a similar revelation that I've had during my time spent doing philosophy. It came to me when I tried to classify philosophers. I realized that they're actually not normal people. You see, every person on this planet instinctively develops natural equilibrium with their own thinkings, but philosophers do not. They come up with ideas and questions, and their thoughts multiply and multiply until everyone around them has been bored to death. The only way that they can survive is to spread their ideas to other people. There is another organism on this planet that follows the same pattern. You know what it is? A virus. Philosophers are a disease, a cancer of this planet. They are a plague, and mindless hedonism is the cure. Right, some self-deprecating humor towards philosophy. Right, why is there, how do you see political philosophy in the Matrix? Well, actually in this quote from Morpheus, when he says, when they are walking around and when they come to see this woman in red, note that all the people that they hired as, hoe zeg je dat het Engels, figurant?
Extras.
Extras.
Yeah, those are all twins in this scene. And he says then, the Matrix is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. But when you're inside, you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters. The very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system. and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. Think about Plato's cave prisoners who refuse to leave the cave. And many of them are so inured, so hopelessly dependent on the system that they will fight to protect it. Now, why is this political philosophy? Well, because you see within every oppressive system, be it fascism, be it communism, or being it radical anarchic capitalism, all of these systems want you to believe that it is the best system, and some become so influenced by it that they feel they have to protect this system, that they feel they have to protect communism or free market capitalism. And the ones that critique that are seen as an enemy. And of course there is a metaphor for some kind of Marxist philosophy. Because what are human beings? Nothing more than batteries that are exploited for their energy. Which left-leaning philosophers and sociologists would say it's exactly what capitalism is doing. It's exactly what social media is doing, and we're not even getting paid for it. They are mining our data and manipulating our attention. They've developed, note that people that developed social media in Silicon Valley, their children are not allowed to be on a smartphone, tablet or whatever. They're not allowed to have any social media at all. And of course the goal of social media is to become rich and hence sell advertisements. But the people that think, oh, I'm free, you know, I take my phone whenever I want to take my phone, etc., etc., they are defending this system. Or there's now a lot of debate about smartphones in schools, that you also see teachers saying, I'm in control of if a kid is on his phone. And kids themselves saying, no, no, I'm in control, I have my own responsibility to deal with the phone, etc. So they are defending this personal responsibility idea that is part of our societal discourse. So you see also some Michel Foucault in the movie. The fight against the Matrix is also a fight against a discourse. And a discourse, French philosophers mean, is a dominant way of thinking in society. And you see it when people say, this system might not be perfect, but it is the best we have, so we should not critique it or try to change it. So those are people that, yeah, in Matrix terms would be called blue-pilled. But of course Trinity and Neo violently fight this system. Okay, final part. Is the Matrix still a mirror to our society or not? Maybe it's a totally obsolete movie, and maybe the Matrix movies in themselves are pointless movies, because even if there is some societal critique in it, this critique does not really have any effect anymore. Nothing has changed. After the movies, the things that it speculates about have only gotten worse. This is called political cynicism. Or say that you also, some would say, societal critique is useless because look what happened during 3 years during the pandemic. People started thinking and saying, well, we should deal differently with the planet. And the virus came from is probably zoonological, meaning it came from an animal and then infected a human being. So we should be more careful with deforestation. We should put some regulation on capitalism, stop subsidizing the fossil fuel industries, and now we are out of lockdowns and nothing has changed. And Bruno Latour said that is because critique has run out of esteem. And he says we have a lot of matters of fact. A matter of fact is climate change. What is another matter of concern? Because nobody cares about it. And yeah, like I already said, does the Matrix help as a critique towards social media, or are they just too powerful? Here's another Plato's cave with all social media emitted on the wall. Or take Mark Zuckerberg's Meta plan. He's constructing a matrix of his own, one could say. I think the relevance in the matrix, and I will conclude with this, is quite relevant still. Because